What percentage of your income do you actually need in retirement? Most people have no idea. Not a rough guess. Not a ballpark. The actual number. And that's strange because this one number predicts retirement success better than almost anything else you could calculate. Better than your savings balance. Better than your investment returns. Better than the age you plan to retire. So let's talk about the replacement rate. The replacement rate is the percentage of your pre-retirement income that your retirement income needs to replace to maintain your standard of living. That income can come from Social Security, personal savings, a pension, or any combination of the three. It's not about hitting a lump sum. It's about generating enough income every year for the rest of your life. Most people think in terms of a savings target instead. $1 million, 500,000. Some round number that sounds big enough to feel safe. But here's the thing. $1 million means something completely different to a retiree who needs $40,000 a year than it does to one who needs $80,000. The dollar figure is almost meaningless without the percentage behind it. The commonly cited benchmark is 70 to 80% of your pre-retirement income. You'll see this number from the Social Security Administration. You'll see it from Fidelity. You'll see it from Vanguard. 3 very different institutions, and they all land in roughly the same range. That should feel reassuring. It's not, once you look closer. Here's the statistic that stops people cold. Fidelity's own research shows that only about 45% of Americans are on track to cover even 70% of their essential retirement expenses. Not 80%. Not the comfortable version of retirement. Just the essentials. Housing, food, healthcare, utilities. And less than half of Americans are on pace to cover that. Sit with that for a second. More than half the country is running short of the floor, not the ceiling. Most people don't know this because most people have never actually run the calculation. They've picked a savings number out of a headline and assumed it would be enough. Very few have sat down and asked what percentage of their current income their future income will actually replace. And this is where things get interesting, because the 70 to 80% figure isn't really one number. It's an average. And averages hide the most important part of the story. Research tied to the Social Security Administration and analysis from the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College both show the same pattern. Lower earners actually need a higher replacement rate, often 85 to 90% or more. That's because a larger share of their income goes toward necessities. Rent, groceries, utilities. Expenses that don't shrink just because you've retired. Higher earners, by contrast, can often get by on less. Somewhere around 65 to 70% is common. Higher earners tend to save more of their income while working, and a bigger share of their spending is discretionary: travel, dining out, upgrades. Those are the expenses that naturally shrink once the paycheck stops. So the right replacement rate depends entirely on who you are, not on some universal formula. On you. Think about why this happens. If you earn $35,000 a year, almost all of it goes to rent, groceries, gas and utilities. There's very little slack in that budget to begin with. Retirement doesn't change the price of milk. It doesn't lower your rent. So nearly the entire percentage has to be replaced, because nearly the entire income was already necessary. Now, think about someone earning $200,000 a year. A meaningful chunk of that goes to things that are, frankly, optional. Nicer vacations, a second car, dining out several nights a week. Retirement naturally trims a lot of that. Not because the person suddenly becomes frugal, but because some of those expenses were tied to the working lifestyle itself. Commuting less, networking dinners disappearing, the wardrobe budget shrinking. That's the entire reason the Center for Retirement Research at Boston College and the Social Security Administration both point to a sliding scale instead of a flat number. It's not that lower earners are worse at planning. It's that their income was already lean, so there's nowhere for the replacement rate to shrink. Social Security plays a different role for every income level too. For the average earner, Social Security data shows it replaces around 40% of pre-retirement income. For lower earners, that number climbs to 55 or even 60%. For higher earners, it can fall to just 25 to 30%. Once you understand that, the real picture starts to form. If Social Security only covers a quarter of what a higher earner needs, the savings gap they have to fill is enormous. If it covers over half of what a lower earner needs, their gap is smaller, but their margin for error is thinner because there's less flexibility in a budget that's mostly necessities to begin with. But here's where things change. Retirement spending isn't flat. A lot of people assume they'll need the same percentage of income every single year of retirement. That's not what the data shows. The Employee Benefit Research Institute has tracked how spending actually shifts once people stop working. Commuting costs disappear. Work clothing disappears. Payroll taxes disappear. Retirement contributions disappear. But healthcare costs rise, and leisure spending often rises too, especially in the early years when people are healthy enough to travel and enjoy the freedom they've been waiting for. And this is where David Blanchett's research at Morningstar adds something most people have never heard of: the retirement smile. Real inflation-adjusted spending tends to be higher in the go-go years right after retirement. Then it declines through the middle years, typically the 70s and into the 80s, as travel and activity slow down naturally. Then it rises again late in retirement, driven almost entirely by healthcare costs. That's a smile shape, not a flat line. High, then low, then high again. A flat 80% replacement rate assumption gets this wrong twice. It overstates how much you'll need in the quieter middle years, and it understates how much you'll need at the end when healthcare costs climb. Think about what that means practically. If you build your entire plan around one flat percentage for 30 years of retirement, you're almost guaranteed to misjudge 2 of the 3 phases. You'll probably oversave for your 70s and 80s when spending naturally eases. And you might underprepare for your late 80s and 90s when medical costs and care needs can spike sharply. That's not a small rounding error. For some retirees, that gap is the difference between comfort and real financial stress in the years they're least able to adjust. This is exactly why so many people feel anxious about retirement, even when they've done everything right. They saved. They contributed to a 401k. But nobody told them the number they were chasing wasn't supposed to be flat in the first place. So what does this actually mean for you? It means the replacement rate matters more than any savings target you've ever set. $1 million is a headline number. An 80% replacement rate, or whatever your real number turns out to be, is personalized. It adjusts for your income. It adjusts for your spending. It adjusts for your Social Security benefits specifically, not the average person's. Calculating your own version isn't complicated. Start with your current annual expenses. Subtract what disappears in retirement: commuting, work costs, payroll taxes, retirement account contributions. What's left is closer to your real retirement need. Compare that to your projected Social Security benefit, which you can find through the Social Security Administration at ssa.gov. The difference between those 2 numbers is the gap your savings actually needs to fill. That's it. That's the whole exercise. Most people never do it, and that's exactly why so many feel behind without knowing why. And you don't need to get it perfectly precise on the first try. Even a rough version tells you more than a savings target ever could, because it's built from your actual life instead of a headline average. So here's the real reframe, and it's a small shift in language that changes everything. Stop asking how much you need to save. Start asking what income your retirement needs to generate every year for the rest of your life. Once you're building backward from an income target instead of forward from a savings guess, the whole plan gets clearer. It stops being abstract. It becomes a number you can actually work toward. A lot of people feel behind on retirement because they've been measuring themselves against the wrong yardstick the entire time. You're not behind because you don't have $1 million sitting somewhere. You might be exactly on track, or closer than you think, once you calculate the number that actually matters for your life. This is also why comparing yourself to a friend's savings balance rarely tells you anything useful. Their income is different. Their spending is different. Their Social Security benefit is different. The comparison that actually matters is between your income and your own future need. So take a minute this week. Look at what you spend now. Think about what disappears once you stop working. Check what Social Security says you're on track to receive. What's your number? Not the headline number everyone talks about. Your actual replacement rate. Drop it in the comments and let's figure out what it means together.